So, hello everybody, and welcome to series 2, the theme of which is how are NGOs growing online. So, as a guest today, we have Sandy Crawley, and welcome, Sandy. It's lovely having you on. Any
Thank you so
introduction you'd
much.
like to give of yours?
I beg your pardon?
Anything
An
you'd like to
introduction?
add? Yeah, anything you would like to add?
Yes, hello. I'm very glad to meet you and to greet you from Canada, where I've been very busy working in the not-for-profit sector, mainly in the arts and culture sector, but also in literacy and writing and publishing, film and television, theater, and music. And those are the areas in which I've concentrated. And then I also run an organization that promotes literacy.
That's
So it's
lovely.
kind of related. It's a social mission, but they're all not-for-profits. Yeah,
That's lovely. So, I had a couple of questions, and I would love to have your answers for them.
sure. And
So,
I'll
the
do the
first,
best I can. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So the first one being, what incident or event influenced you to really start an NGO, a non-profit organization?
Well, I was born into a family of filmmakers. So I was working in the creative sector from the time I was a baby, actually. I was in front of the camera at two months old. And I'm much older than that now, as you can tell. And then I went into music and theater, and so I was a performer. And then at a certain time, I took up a leadership role within my professional association or union, you might say, which is the Performers Union here in Canada for film and television, radio, all the recorded media. I became the national president, and I served there for 7 years. And in that capacity, I joined a lot of volunteer organizations. I was on the board of national organizations around the arts and so on. So then when I finished that and reached a certain age, and my son and my wife were also actors, and so it looked like maybe a steady income would be good, and I had developed new skills. So then I took up leadership of some paid positions running not-for-profit organizations, one for filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, one for writers. And then I worked for the Association of Theaters, which was interesting because then I was bargaining across the table from people with whom I was in their union too. So yeah, it's a varied existence. But so my mother was a very cultured woman and had leadership qualities. And, I learned to believe that it was good to contribute to society. So that's what spurred me on, really.
That's lovely. That's lovely to hear. So how do you really contribute to the organization, your own self, like as an individual?
Well, I was taking the role of the main, like the head of staff. So what we call an executive director. So I was really responsible for everything from fundraising, communications with members, communications with government in Canada, because we're so close to, the huge marketing machine that is the United States of America. We really, the way we grew our arts sector here was through support from the state. In the late 1950s, I would say, there were a group of citizens who convinced the government of the time that we needed to, if we wanted to have our own expressions of culture, we needed to use some public monies to do that, along with charities and donations and so on. So when I was serving as executive director of these various organizations, I was really responsible for everything. I would hire a small staff. I would oversee, design budgets and apply for grants for worthy projects and, maintain the membership and serve the members and promote the art form, whatever it might be.
That's great. So you talked about fundraising and raising funds, right? So how did you really do that, and how do you manage your funds for the organization and everything?
Well, for arts organizations, even though we're a big country, but still a relatively small population, even, certainly compared to India and even compared to the United States, there's only not quite 40 million of us yet. And the communications challenges are great. And as I said, a lot of the support for all of our arts organizations comes directly from government. So government relations is a huge part of it. There are agencies that fund the arts, and you have to apply for those funds. Some of those funds are ongoing. You just have to maintain the relationship. But if you want to do something in particular to grow the organization or to go online, as I know you're interested in talking about, when in the 90s when online became a reality, then you have to apply. You have to argue your case. You look at the terms of reference that the agencies are putting out, and you say, oh yeah, we fit in here. This is our purpose. You get testimonials from your members. You get support. If you can get support from corporations, they'll have to match funds, and so on. So it has its complexities, but it's fairly straightforward. It's basically making a sale. In this case, you're selling bureaucrats, and you're selling them a service as opposed to a product, but that's how it works.
And where exactly does the money go?
Well, it goes, as with any good organization, I think your main resource is your small but able staff. So most of the money will often go to those salaries, but also if you have an office, if you have infrastructure like a computer and so on and so forth, you have to pay rent, you have to, buy supplies. When we were all working on paper, you have to have printers and files and so on. It's a lot simpler in a way now with electronics, but, and of course, during COVID, a lot of the arts organizations that I know are now working from home because it wasn't safe to, gather. And so there's some money to be saved if you don't have to rent an office, but, it's overhead. It's overhead and salaries, basically. That it's no different from any other business in that way.
All right. And you talked about the going online part of your business, right? So
yes.
How exactly is your organization going online?
Well, I'm talking about, there are 5 different organizations that I have led now. The one that I'm still running is called the National Reading Campaign. That's the literacy organization. Okay. We use social media. We use tools like this one, Zoom, to meet and so on. Right. And all of those other organizations. As these tools develop, we use them. But for instance, when I was running an organization of freelance writers, we got a relatively big grant, about $250,000 from the Canadian government. We set up an online marketplace called Find a Writer. And so if somebody needed a writer, these were periodical writers, magazines and newspaper writers, freelancers. So when someone had an assignment, they could go to our website and they could look at somebody's resume and see what they'd done before. They could search by various search terms or by name and so on. Things like that. And social media, obviously, I think any organization these days has to have a social media presence. They want to satisfy their members. Now, what I found recently, though, as just an observation, because I'm not running a membership organization anymore, but as I say, I've run 4 of them at different times, is that the newer generation, your generation, sometimes don't see the need to be part of a professional association. They feel that they can access all the connections they need, online with a little device like this, and find each other and find their employers and so on. I think that's a mistake, because I think that if we're going to keep standards, any kind of standards of compensation, of safety, and all those things in every industry, not just the arts, then we need to work together. And so I believe in that kind of solidarity. I'm not like a rabid unionist or anything, but I think it's very important to set some standards. And I think
absolutely. Yeah. That's lovely to hear about the literature and everything. So lastly, I had a question of how exactly does the NGO support the long-term vision and strategy of the company you're exactly working for?
Well, like as in the for-profit world, we have to plan. We have to plan ahead. So we actually periodically invest in a 5-year plan as time goes by, and as conditions change so quickly. Now, operational plans and 3-year plans and even 1-year plans are perhaps more practical, because if you have a 5-year plan, by the time 2 years have passed, the conditions have changed and you have to adjust. But obviously, for nonprofits, I assume it's rather much the same probably in India with your British heritage, which we have. that you have for nonprofits, you probably have a board of directors. Under law, you have to have a board of directors who,
Right.
depending on your resources, you either compensate them or they're just volunteers. They could be members of your organization. They could be outside advisors. It's often good to have a lawyer, an accountant, people who know how to do those things, because lots of artists don't have those skills. Regular meetings of the board and consultation, and you form committees with depending on the size of the organization and the complexity. You have to have committees to look after finances, communications, planning, and so on. So there's no real rocket science to it. It's pretty much common sense, but you have to make collective decisions, especially in a not-for-profit world. It's not as if, I'm the boss, I own the business, I can do whatever I like.
Right.
I have
Absolutely.
to seek advice.
Right.
And listen to each other and find consensus,
That is there, I think, in everything, not even just in NGOs or anything. In everything, you need to have advice and seek advice, right?
I think it's wise. I think there are some people we know who've been flying out to space in their big rockets who aren't necessarily taking much advice from anyone else. But most of us, yes, I think we have to work together.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for doing this again. And it was lovely having you on.
It's a great pleasure. It's nice to meet you. And I'm happy to say hello to all of your listeners and so on. And best of luck with this series.
Thank you so much. And it was lovely having you on. A very insightful session indeed.